The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
They may be drinkers, Robin, but they're also human beings.
Hell yeah, let's get stinko.
This is the Giles and the Goalie podcast as part of the Zone Coverage Podcast Network. With your hosts, Giles Farrell and Ben Remington.
Welcome to the Giles and the Goalie podcast. I am your host, Giles Farrell, joined as always by my co-host, Ben Remington.
Hello.
We are back after a little bit longer than usual break, but we didn't want to record in the middle of the Wild-Canucks series as we just felt that the shows would only have a shelf life of a day or less, given the short time between games. So we just kind of held out until the end of the series and then the draft lottery. So that's a little bit why we waited from the preview show to bring you today's show. But we hopefully now we're going to do a little more regular schedule, but life happens, so who knows. But we do have a lot of ground to cover in a little bit of time, so we won't bore you too much with extracurricular nonsense that we sometimes like to fill time with, and dive right into it. The Minnesota Wild lost their qualifying round series to the Vancouver Canucks 3-1. The Canucks turned it around after losing game 1 to Minnesota 3-0, which kind of gave folks a little bit of optimism for the Wild to move on. But that optimism was very short-lived as the Wild dropped 3 straight, and really they showed a lot of warts in those 3 games that they lost in a row, with the last game being a 5-4 overtime loss. And it's just a weird trend that the Wild always lose a playoff series in overtime. That last loss always comes in overtime, just a dagger. But what were your thoughts on the series at large? I know you sporadically got to watch, given your time constraints. But what did you think of the series?
Well, we had talked about the series leading up to it, and basically said we liked the Wild's chances. They had done well against the Canucks in the regular season, and that was kind of out there, and you had done a series on that. We said they needed league average goaltending, and they needed, obviously they needed some goal scoring. They got some of the goal scoring, but, despite Alex Stalock looking really good in the first game, things kind of went a little wonky for him in the following 3 games, and they ended up with some below average goaltending if you look at the pure numbers at the end of the day. And ultimately that's what sunk him, because those games were pretty close. Like you said, the last game was in overtime. There wasn't a blowout in the bunch. So, had the goaltending been a little bit better, I think that the Wild could have made that a real competitive series. But that's just kind of my first thought on it. I know a lot of folks will probably think I'm eager to slam one Alex Stalock, but it just kind of is what it is. Like Alex Stalock is an NHL backup goalie, and I think he played well enough to earn that status, because that status was very much questioned by even by us. Very recently, and as recent as early in this season. But he's improved his game to the point where I think he's an NHL quality backup goaltender. But that's it. And so to expect him to go out there and perform in the playoffs well enough for you to win a series, I think was probably foolish on our part to expect that he was going to carry on that hot streak from a whopping 4 months ago. So that's just kind of the first and foremost thing that jumps out to me with the series.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Goaltending definitely was part of the problem. Game 2, I wrote a piece after highlighting that while it wasn't the underlying reason why the Wild lost, it certainly played a factor as it could have been better. And then again in games 3 and 4, could have been better. But also, the Wild as a whole just showed how many warts this roster had. In addition to just not having even league average goaltending, something we just said time and again on this show. They were very bad down the middle outside of Eric Stahl. They really showed that an improvement could be made on the third defensive pairing as Brad Hunt and Carson Soucy were not up to the task. The power play was bad, and they just had two units that just could never get on the same page. Alex Galchenyuk and Jordan Greenway were monstrosities up front at forward, in addition to Matt Zuccarello, who the Wild pay a lot of money to. He basically did not show up for 4 games, which is a major red flag. There was a lot of things, and you could probably label it in this series as death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Yeah.
Where not one single thing was the main problem. It was just all these different things added up, and then you just finally had that straw that broke the camel's back. But that's kind of how I reflect on the series now, is all of these different things added up. There just wasn't one singular thing where you point to and say that was the problem. It was a collective team effort, and we'll come to this in a little bit, but Bill Guerin addressed the media after the series on Monday, and he basically said this team is not good enough and it's time to make changes, which we've heard that time and again from NHL general managers, and that just turns out to be GM speak. But maybe there is cause for change on the horizon, but who knows?
I think credit where credit's due. Paul Fenton ended up making some tweaks. Whether they were good ideas or not was a different story. I mean, Kevin Fiala is working out wonderfully, but the rest of the trades he made kind of stunk. But he made tweaks. I think that's fair, and I think Guerin was spot on in his analysis. Like, this team certainly has pieces, and is certainly on the cusp of being a playoff team. But they're just there's plenty of changes to be made, so it'll be a very interesting offseason, aside from the fact that the offseason will happen in freaking October.
Yeah, what a time to be alive. Some notable forwards in this series who didn't find the score sheet. In fact, I'm going to highlight the forwards in this series who had 1 point or less in this series. And they are Joel Eriksson Ek, Nico Sturm, but he only played 2 games, Marcus Foligno, Matt Zuccarello, Mikko Koivu, Alex Galchenyuk, Ryan Hartman, Jordan Greenway, and Ryan Donato, who only played 2 games. So in essence, you have 4 forwards out of the 13 that played in this series who had 2 or more points in this series. And I could not have been more wrong going into this series. I said Minnesota had better forward depth up front, but it could not have been further from the truth. We saw way too many disappearing acts in this. And, if you're Bill Guerin, you have to be frothing at the mouth that Kirill Kaprizov is landed in America and the Twin Cities even on Monday afternoon to plug him into the lineup. And I think we're probably going to see some major changes to the bottom 6 at least. moving forward. That's kind of where we're going to segue to. But as to what the Wild do next, but finding more quality forwards who can score will be a big thing. And like I said, finding quality play down the middle has to be, really priority one outside of goaltending this offseason. But what do you think has to change in terms of this roster for the next season, whenever that is?
Well, I think that it doesn't. It's not going to take a ton. Like, there's a lot of folks that probably think that you need to replace, 9 out of the 12 forwards or something ridiculous like that. But yeah, I'll make an analogy to baseball. When a team acquires, a closer or a really good reliever, and it just makes their bullpen click down the stretch, it's because everyone gets slotted into a notch, below essentially where they were before. And it just makes things line up so much better. And that's what the Wild need. The Wild need a bona fide, no S first line. And, certainly Fiala can be a piece for that. You would really hope Kirill Kaprizov could be a piece for that. If they can find a center for that, if they've got a bona fide all-star packed first line, then the rest of the team, the rest of the depth, I think slots in fairly well. But when you're trotting out a very much a second line, with some zest of Fiala on it, as your first line every night, that makes it harder for the rest of the team to match up. When you're trotting out pretty much a second line, 2 third lines, and a fourth line, against a team like Vancouver that very much has a first line with Elias Pettersson, and kind of their offense, even though it wasn't super deep, kind of it just slots better when you have a first line like that. It helps with the matchups. So I think that if they can miraculously, and obviously the candidates aren't out there in free agency this offseason for first line centers, but if they can figure out anything to really build that bona fide first line, I think that they're well on their way with essentially adding just one player. It just has to be very much the right player.
Right. Obviously, there was a debate about would they get that impact center should their odds in the draft lottery had been favorable. But as we saw on Monday, the draft lottery slipped away from the Wild as they were not selected. But we'll come to that in a few minutes. And I do agree that you need that bona fide top line that can get it done, and it just makes everyone better. And that was actually a perfect analogy with a bullpen in baseball. But also we haven't talked about it, and we're going to now, and a whole lot, is the goaltending, which is the 1A or 1B of the offseason plan. And where do you go from here if you're Bill Guerin? Do you ride out the last year of Dubnick and hope for the best, or do you try and make some moves and bring somebody fresh in? And we'll throw in here the caveat that we found out today, Monday, that Bill Guerin deemed goaltending not good at all this season, which is what we've been saying for literally the entire season. So he did reveal that goaltending coach Bob Mason, who had been with the Wild for 20 years, will not return to that position. And I will yield the floor to my esteemed colleague from Burnsville and gloat.
Yeah, I don't want to celebrate Bob Mason's firing because I'm never a fire the coach for the sake of firing the coach guy. And we've never been those guys. Both of us, stumped to keep Yo around, stumped to keep Chuck Fletcher around, stumped to keep Bruce around, certainly because it was Bruce. But in this situation, it just absolutely was a change that needed to be made. And I don't know what it is. I don't know what the deficiencies are in Bob Mason's coaching. But certainly when you see the results on the ice, there's just a different direction that they can go. And, you look at the Darcy Kemper situation where he's wildly inconsistent, gets replaced by Dubnick, is a good backup and is a terrible backup, leaves the team and suddenly becomes a very good goaltender. Devin Dubnick himself, who was wildly inconsistent after his first half season here. Basically, as soon as he's, a year removed from the tutelage of Sean Burke, he just starts, this roller coaster ride of months where he is saving, 95% of shots to months where he's barely saving 90. So I think it was an overdue move, quite frankly, but it's a good move, and I'm really excited for Wild goaltending, kind of opening up a new chapter after, like you said, 20 years. I mean, Bob Mason certainly earned his stripes here, and certainly deserves a lot of respect for the time he put in as an NHL coach. But it's very much a move that I think is going to help this team quite a bit. As far as the goaltending situation at large, we've talked about this already, but I think you kind of have to go after someone big because the goaltending market, as opposed to the top line center market, is very good this year. You've got some names out there. You've got Robin Lehner, who is going to start in the playoffs for Vegas. You've got Jacob Markstrom, who we just saw have a pretty good series. Would probably be a cheaper option. You've got names out there that you could certainly upgrade your goaltending to an NHL caliber starter, which you probably don't have right now. So I think you at least try. You have to see what you can do. If you don't end up landing one of those names, I think it's okay. And if you want to give Kaapo Kähkönen an extended look next season, that's certainly understandable because he looked pretty good in what limited action we saw him in this year. So that's just my thought on it is shoot for the moon, try to get an NHL quality starter this offseason, and you've got a backup plan, and that backup plan is kind of what you decide to do with Dubnick and or Kaapo Kähkönen.
I see the buyout Dubnick crowd. I hear you. I completely understand where you're coming from, and the history of this podcast is littered with me telling you I'm against this buyout for such and such a reason, and hang on another year or something. And I will only hear the Dubnick should be bought out argument is if Kaapo Kähkönen's going to be your guy next year. If you're not going to have Kähkönen as your starter and just roll with him next year, who was the AHL goaltender of the year, I'll remind you, then I would say see if the new goalie coach can put some kind of life into Devin Dubnick like Sean Burke did a few years ago, and just ride out that last year of his contract so you're not paying someone to not be on your roster, because the Wild are only going to have 1 year of Kirill Kaprizov on his entry-level deal. The year after next, they're going to have to re-sign Kevin Fiala to a contract, and if his play carries on, he's going to cost a lot of money. You are going to have some big contracts to hand out, and just having buyout cap hits on is probably not the best idea. And I feel like if the Wild buy out anyone, it's not going to be Dubnick, it's going to be Victor Rask.
Yeah.
So, which is even further in anger territory for me, but I wouldn't even want to do that. I would almost at this point pay someone to take him off your roster that has a lot of cap hits, but we can house that conversation for another day.
Fair.
But there's just not an attractive enough goaltender that's going to be a free agent to go after, that you're going to want to massively overpay for, cost you an arm and a leg to trade for one. So if you, want to go with Kaapo Kähkönen next year, then fine, buy out Dubnick. I'm fine with that. But anything else is just let Dubnick have one last run in the sun and see if a new voice in his head can help maybe iron out some issues in his game. Because that's basically what we've been clamoring for the last few years. And you look at Exhibit 1, Capital Exhibit 1, Darcy Kemper, who absolutely stole a series for the Arizona Coyotes in the qualifying round to send them on. Just the fact that he is so night and day from when he was here in Minnesota, and how one goal could just phase him and turns into 5 goals, and now 1 goal and he's still rock solid. Something clicked, a different voice, something. Somebody told him something that he learned when he wasn't here. So change is good.
Yeah, I don't disagree that running with Kapanen is a reason to buy out Dubnick, and I'm more apt to try to sign a free agent goaltender, but I think it's entirely possible they don't. I'm not saying they absolutely positively have to, because this offseason is going to be weird. This season was certainly weird. Next season is going to be weird. It's all very weird, and there's a lot of uncertainty around everything right now. Every single thing is uncertain right now. So I would not be at all surprised if they don't sign a free agent goaltender and just kind of see what they can do with the crap that they have. And I guess we'll find out.
I guess we can go on about this. Mikko Koivu probably has played his final game in a Wild uniform, as we got the long camera pauses on him after the overtime loss in Game 4. So it seems like he's out the door. Not counting any of the free agents, which I don't even think the Wild have.
No,
outside Galchenyuk.
It's
You don't count Galchenyuk and Koivu. Who has played their last game for the Wild?
Oof, good question.
Do you have a tingling sensation as to this person has played their last game?
I know we got a question about this in the mailbag. I'd be interested to see if someone is higher on him and a change of scenery would really help Jordan Greenway. Certainly a kid with, a good enough amount of talent, and obviously something that is very important to a lot of NHL GMs is a lot of size. So I don't wonder if you couldn't get something for him and, just kind of see if you can get something for him and if that might help his career, honestly, because sometimes, like we talked about with Kemper, that's all it takes is just a change of scenery, and that's not just for goalies. So I think Jordan Greenway is a prime candidate. As you mentioned, Victor Rask, I think, is maybe a prime candidate. I shudder to think what the Wild would have to give up for a team to take on that contract and that player, but who knows? And I'm also interested to see if anything happens with the defense. Just kind of looking ahead to the Seattle expansion draft. Again, it's the same rules as Vegas. You can only protect 3 defensemen. You have to protect Ryan Suter. You basically have to protect Jared Spurgeon. So then it comes down to Dumba versus Brodin. And so I think that it could be very possible that Matt Dumba is a guy that is dealt. It seems like Brodin is the one favored by the team. That's at least what it was last time around. I guess we don't know this time around, but very, very possible one of Dumba or Brodin gets dealt in this offseason just so they get that out of the way with that Seattle draft looming.
I might be wrong, but I think you can protect all 4 of those defensemen if you want to.
Yeah, you could
Yeah, you
protect
can.
8 skaters.
I
You can
just looked
protect
it up.
8
Yeah,
skaters
you
or
can.
7 forwards and 3 defense, which I don't know that. I think it was only 2 or 3 teams did the 8 skater route last time around.
Yeah, and I'd
So
have
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'd have to read into it more, but there's in terms of the rules, just to refresh my memory, but if you go the route where you protect those 4 defensemen, then you're probably going to expose a very decent forward because you're arguably going to be protecting a goalie somewhere. But yeah, I'd have to read a little bit more into that. And then you've got the no move clauses on Parisi, Zuccarello, Spurgeon, and Suter. Spurgeon's goes into effect this next year with his new contract, in which makes him the highest cap hit on the Wild roster.
Oh, wow. Higher than Parisi and Suter finally, huh?
Yeah, he's going to have he can throw some jabs around now as the highest paid guy on the team. Not that he would, but I would hope he.
No, he certainly wouldn't. But yeah, just that 8 skater thing. Like you have to protect Parisi and Zuccarello. You're obviously protecting Fiala because he would be exposed. And then I guess if you only have one other skater you want to protect. Because Kaprizov wouldn't even be eligible yet because he'd only played 1 season at that point. If it's the same, which it is the same rules as Vegas, so he'd be safe. Maybe you do go the route. Maybe you do go the 8 skaters route. The Wild are certainly in better position to do that this time around than they were with the Vegas draft, where they had it seemed like they had a great deal more forward depth back then.
Yeah. Back to my original question, which was which Wild player do you think's played their last game outside of the free agents? I feel like Ryan Donato would be a good trade candidate. I personally don't want to see it, and I was baffled that he was scratched after game 2. Just when the team needs offense and scratching a more productive offensive player in the limited time he gets just did not seem like a great move. So whatever issues were going on with him and Bruce seems to have carried over with him and Dean Evison. So I feel like Ryan Donato will probably get moved on this offseason, maybe find him a good home. But it's kind of where I'm leaning. It's also just so hard to kind of predict what the offseason is going to look like. And, I mean, we don't even really have a clue when everything's going to go on.
Right.
Just because everything is still a fluid situation, even though, we've had, 3 weeks in a row now, the NHL has had 0 positive COVID tests in their bubble. So everything seems to be all systems go. So, yeah. Any other changes you want to see made by the Wild? Or did we cover it all?
I think we covered it all. I'd be the Donato thing is interesting. It seems like his Bruce's distaste for him has carried over. But I guess the flip side of that is something we haven't mentioned is Nico Sturm looked pretty good, I thought, in the 2 games that he played in Vancouver or against Vancouver. I kind of liked what I saw out of him. I think that he's an interesting kid for a bottom 6 position next year. He certainly could fill that role.
Yeah, he seems like a guy who you want in as a bottom 6 center, and he will be on the cheap next year. So that seems like almost a no-brainer situation. Yeah, as we mentioned before, The draft lottery was held Monday. The Minnesota Wild were one of 8 teams that had a shot at the first overall pick after the incredibly confusing phase 1 of the draft lottery. Somehow a team in the play-in tournament was selected number 1 overall. And once the play-in series came to an end on Sunday, all the 8 teams eliminated were entered into a same chance drawing, as we saw on TV, where they put all the ping pong balls into the lottery machine, and then it spit out the winner. But the Wild did not get that lucky to get the first overall pick, as such is life in this town. The New York Rangers were the lucky recipients of the number 1 overall pick. The Wild, because of points percentage, were the worst team left out of the remaining 7 teams, I should say. So they will pick number 9 on the draft, which isn't bad. This is a top-heavy draft, so the Wild having a top 10 pick is very good, and hopefully they can address a need up front at forward in their pipeline. But what were you thinking going into the draft lottery? Because we really hadn't had a chance to talk about that. Were you thinking Wild have a good shot, or this is Minnesota sports? Not really. What was running through your mind as in the run up to the lottery selection?
Yeah, I never even entertained the idea that they could land the number 1 overall pick. It just doesn't seem like, I mean, you can go the Minnesota sports defeatist route, and I certainly understand that. But it just is one of those things where you just, you feel it, and it never felt like it was a real thing to me. It never felt like that could actually happen to them because, with Kaprizov coming here, it just felt like too much of a good thing, and you can only get so lucky in one off season, and to land Kaprizov and Lafreniere, who seems to be the number 1 consensus guy and the future superstar, it just really didn't see that happening.
Yeah, and if you're feeling kind of defeated about the Wild not getting the number 1 overall pick and sliding back down to 9, I would encourage you to go check out Tony Abbott's piece at 10K Rinks MN, or excuse me, 10krinks.com. Sorry. As he kind of gave you a few reasons why the Wild, you should feel good about the Wild having the 9th pick still. As I mentioned, it's a top-heavy draft. The Wild have a new scouting director, the guy that they signed away from Vancouver, or he left Vancouver and signed here, and this is the guy that really had a hand in picking Brock Besser, Elias Pettersson, Quinn Hughes, basically the young core of the Canucks that you see now. This guy had a hand in drafting them all. So you really have to feel good about the Wild drafts moving forward, especially after the last 2 drafts where the Wild have seemingly done well under a previous regime. But you got to feel good about drafting going forward and hopefully finding some potential game breaker talents in the draft. So that just a little bit of optimism for you if you're looking for some. But I don't think it's necessarily bad that the Wild are going to draft 9th. If you're pointing at, well, the Wild had the 9th pick once and they drafted James Shepherd. Well, yeah, that's true, but that was 14 years ago under a different regime, different staff. A lot of things have changed, and so the Wild, yeah, it'll be a little different this time. Methinks I don't think we're going to be drafting a 4th line / press box guy. So that's just my my opinion there.
If they could get away from drafting exclusively two-way Scandinavian players, seemingly, I should say, the caveat seemingly, that would be great. And I think that, certainly with picks like Besser, like Pedersen, like Hughes, upside seems to be something that they shouldn't be afraid of going forward. And that seemed like it was something that the Wild were afraid of for a fairly long time. I mean, there were obviously some exceptions, like Matt Dumba was a big upside guy. But it just felt like the Wild for a long time shied away from risk reward. And then you end up taking players like Julek Shadak, who's a nice player, but he was kind of the archetype player for the Wild's draft table for many, many years.
Yeah. Excuse me. That name that I mentioned, the guy who was hired after he left the Canucks was Judd Brackett, who is now the Minnesota Wild director of scouting. So essentially he will oversee the entire department and then report to Bill Guerin, obviously, which is
Right.
a very good setup. So yeah, the last two things here on our docket. We already talked about Bob Mason. You didn't want to necessarily gloat on that, which is respectable, but some people might be, not me, mad at you for not having more to say on that, but that is what it is. Any other thoughts on the Wild at large before we dive into the mailbag? We're descending into another long off season, another long pause. Kirill Kaprizov arrived in town today. I couldn't meet him at the airport, unfortunately.
It's too bad.
But he looks ready to go. Yeah, I don't know if you have any other thoughts before we hit the mailbag.
I'm not going to apologize for not being braggadocious about Bob Mason, just because, I never am on those things because these are still people, and again, I absolutely positively hate the people that very publicly stump for people to get fired. We know some folks that would have loved to, run Chuck Fletcher out of town with pitchforks and torches. And there was certainly a lot of folks who felt that way about Mike Yeo. And I don't think it's a good look. And so when I've talked about Bob Mason, I've tried to be respectful about it. Even though I very much thought a change should be made for very objective reasons. But yeah, I don't know. I don't feel comfortable with gloating about it just because I thought that it was something that should happen for, I don't know, the last 4 or 5 seasons. But yeah, it is what it is. But one thing that we haven't probably mentioned a whole lot of is just a nod to Mikko Koivu. And it's unfortunate as it usually is that his last game with the Wild is a loss in the playoffs. But yeah, just a sick tap to that career because, it's very, very likely that this has been his final game with the Wild. The way his game is degraded, I don't see him in the NHL any longer. And that's unfortunate, but it is what it is. And he had a very nice career and certainly, earned a lot of respect, obviously. So just a shout out to him and an end of an era. And even though it's overly welcomed by a lot of Wild fans, still going to be very weird watching this team without him on it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was a little surreal. It still is a little surreal thinking about the fact that it could be that was it. Watching him walk down the tunnel for the last time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it just kind of a weird situation, but yeah, that's probably about it. Yeah, let's get to the mailbag. We did have a few questions filter in. Morpheus from the Matrix asks, who are the Wild picking at number 9? I'm gonna cop out here. I'm gonna say, ask me that again next week. I am now gonna start diving into draft stuff. I haven't given a whole lot of reading to it yet, but I'm definitely getting into that now. As the Wild season is over, so I want to give a good answer. So ask me next week.
I'll give an answer. Write this down. Last name, Hug and Kiss. First name, Amanda. Write that down.
Oh man, I missed that Simpson. There was a Simpsons commercial on the Fox 29 or whatever, back when it was Fox 29, where they would just run those clips of crank calls to Mo.
Oh, so good.
It's great, and they're all so good individually, but then they just slam them into this 30-second spot, which was just gold.
Has anyone seen Mike Roch?
Mike Roch.
Looking for Mike Roch.
Has anybody seen Mike Roch? I'm a stupid moron with a big face and my butt smells and I want to kiss my own butt. Okay, before we go down that rabbit hole, let's see. Nate Wells, friend of the show, asks, more depressing for Minnesotans. Actually, can we rename Nate Wells as instead of the Joy Bishop of our show? He's I move for one episode. We call him the Regis Philbin to our Letterman.
I'm down with
that. Happened during the pause. Regis Philbin passed away, and
yes,
his anytime he was on the Late Show with Letterman, that was always just gold. So I don't think we covered that last week, but he asks, more depressing for Minnesotans, second off season or second winter?
Oof.
Wow.
That's a tough one.
That's hard-hitting questions.
You know, I think I'll probably go with second winter on this one ever so slightly because there was a pretty loud contingent of Wild fans that wanted nothing more than to get to this exciting draft lottery that they thought the Wild were going to win. And let's be honest, I mean, the Wild were the 10th seed, and the only reason that they were in any semblance of a playoff whatsoever is because the final, month and ish of the season was canceled. So I don't know. It doesn't. I don't think Wild fans should be uber disappointed with how this season played out. This team is very much on the mend. So.
Yeah. I'm going to go with second winter too, just because there's still hockey happening. So it's not, the rest of the league isn't in an off season. So I can still enjoy hockey. Our Knights are still playing. They're the top seed in the West. So just second winter just kills and it Minnesota weather does that to us. It'll be winter, and then it'll heat up for a little bit. It'll start to tease us that spring is coming, and then boom, you get 2 more months of blistering cold weather, which is just the worst. So second winter 10 out of 10 times.
When it snows in freaking mid-April.
Right.
Ugh.
Tony asks, what is a good Facebook page that I could follow and share with my friends? Well, that's terrific. You can go to facebook.com/10KRinksMN, which is the new vertical for the zone coverage Wild page. In case you're wondering. I don't think I explained that before.
Right. I really enjoy that you guys took over the Wild Extra Twitter account. I like that because that Twitter account garnered a lot of followers, which was great because we did great work at Wild Extra there for a little while. And it was really a shame that there was so many hockey fans that were missing out on the great coverage that you and I were doing and the great coverage that so many different folks, tied to Wild Extra were doing. That there was folks that weren't necessarily following the rest of us, and were just following Wild Extra for whatever reason. So I'm glad to see that get some life breathed into it.
Speaking of Wild Extra, I was chatting with Lappy the other day. He slid into my DMs during the playoffs, and him and I were talking about plays and whatnot. So that's always fun to shoot the breeze with him, because I learned so much from his X's and O's pieces.
Yeah, he did phenomenal work. He was definitely one of the many great contributors that we had.
He actually messaged me first by saying I was glad to have picked up his path in the GIF category, which is what he was doing. He was making GIFs and then plugging them into pieces showing you why the Wild were doing good at this or not good at this. So,
right.
Yeah, fun aside. Brett Marshall asks, if you're Bill Guerin, what are you doing with Stalock, Dubnick, Brodin, Dumba, Galchenyuk, and Rask? We pretty much covered that. I think we really didn't talk about Stalock much, but I think it's pretty much a safe bet. He'll be back next year.
Yeah.
Stefan M asks, Corey Pronman has had Marco Rossi at 9th overall recently. How would a scoring center like him fit in there? Not to mention him being Austria's next talent after Vanek, Raffle, and Grabner. First overall will never go to the Minnesota Wild because nice things can be had elsewhere only. There's a lot to unpack there.
There is, and I want to know what happened to Serious Mashup. Is Serious Mashup chained up in somebody's basement? Is he in the attic being fed fish heads? I want to know what happened to Serious Mashup.
Yeah, I was just about to say, no, that's a name I've not heard in a long time.
Yeah, certainly, neither one of us has dove at all into the draft just yet. But yeah, I think playmaking center is above and beyond what the doctor ordered for the Minnesota Wild. So whether he comes from Austria or whether he comes from Australia, I don't think it really matters. A playmaking center is what they need.
Oh, exactly. And at 9, there seems to be some good centers there. I'm not even going to hesitate to say you have to pick for need here. You cannot.
I would agree.
Best player available. The Wild have such a deficiency down the middle and have forward in the pipeline. If you don't go forward, or I should say, you have to go center, at least forward, but almost center at this juncture.
Yep.
That's just dumb. So.
Yep.
I didn't know he was Austria's next great talent, but that's good to know.
We certainly do love Austrians here.
And then he did have some good foreshadowing about the first overall pick not coming to Minnesota, because he sent that in yesterday, the day before the draft lottery. So
yeah, well, he's been around enough to where he knows.
And then another one from Morpheus from the Matrix. Koivu, what are your predictions on Koivu? We hit on that, and then do you think the Wild should move Greenway? Yeah, we kind of hit on that, and we kind of have him as somebody who probably will be, I should say, could be moved, and it might make sense now while there's still seemingly some value. But, yeah, there you go. That's the mailbag. Boom, boom, boom.
We haven't talked about, granted it's been fractured, and I think there's only been one episode since it happened.
Here to start the third period. What team is this? It's not Team USA. Oh, yes, it is. They've got on new uniforms. They're wearing the logo of the Duck. I've never seen this before.
Oh, yes! We haven't talked about this.
We have not, and I'm a little bit surprised we didn't. I know last show was a little bit jam-packed. We wanted to do a series preview, but I'm a little bit surprised that it didn't sneak its way in.
Absolutely firing that drop in there. Yes, it's funny. We haven't even said what we're talking about, but I already know what you're talking about.
I know. Of course,
at the end of the show.
Yeah.
Ben, no doubt, talking about the release of the Seattle Kraken logos and uniforms. which came in, I think it was the week before last, because I think it happened the week I came back from Jamaica. So
it happened.
That would have been 2 weeks ago now.
Right.
Yeah.
It was like the it was middle of the week.
Yeah, it was like.
So it was right after we had recorded.
It was a Thursday, if I remember right. So yeah.
And we recorded on like Tuesday or something like that.
Yeah. So yeah, actually I can't remember because it's been so long and so much has happened since then. But, the first thing we got to see was the Seattle Kraken logo. Actually, it was revealed that the Seattle Kraken was the name. First thoughts on the name?
I liked it, and it was a name that I had supported, when it had been brought up for a long time. And it was one of those names where it's so much fun that you really doubted it happening just because when you really boil it down, it's a lot of fun, and it's kind of almost to a silly aspect. And the NHL, that's not really their vibe, and so it's fun to the extreme that I'm surprised that NHL team did it. But I think that it's going to be great, and certainly they already have a passionate fan base there. They sold out of their season tickets lightning fast.
Faster
and so, right. And so, I mean, we've seen what Vegas did, with a lot of naysayers. So I'm very interested to see what Seattle does. And I think that this name is going to be very much embraced, and it's going to be a lot of fun for those Seattle fans.
Yeah, I'm with you. I know a lot of people poo-pooed the name Kraken, but honestly, it is unique, and I think there's a lot of different ways you can go with logos and colors and jerseys and whatnot with this, which I think was a first solid step in having a good logo / jersey base, which is have a name where you can go with options, not something like Wild, which is, well, what's that? Like, you at least know what a Kraken is.
Right. It's mythical, but at least you know what it is.
Right. Which gets us next to the logo that was revealed. Actually, there were two logos that was revealed. The first of which is the main logo, which if you're looking at it, wherever or out on our favorite uniform site, NHLuniforms.com, you see the Seagram's gin looking S in teal with an eye at the top under the first, I don't know, what do you call it, the first squiggle or whatever.
Sure.
S. I like it. I think it was a solid step, and again, some people didn't like it, but again, for a first logo, this is very good. And actually we didn't say this, but I just thought of this when I said Seagram's Gin, but the name Kraken, to no surprise, the Seattle Kraken signed a sponsorship with Kraken Rum, so it was a match.
Right.
But what do you think of the logo?
I think it's good. It's tough to come up with a logo and to do something original, and I think they did with does it look like a Seagram's S? Sure, but there's a million fonts out there, and they've all been used. So no matter what font of S you use, it's going to look like something. And so I think folks, crapping on it for that, I think are off base a little bit. I think the tentacle detail in the middle of the letter is cool. And the eye kind of really does make it pop. I think that they added the eye, I guess, later in the process, and it really kind of does complete the logo. So I do like it. It's not a logo that I see and I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. But I think it's a solid, I don't know, I'd give it a B, maybe even a B plus. I think it's I know what we're both going to grade the other logo. But I think that I think the S logo was solid. I think it was a good effort. I think it fits the team very well.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, the other logo, their shoulder patch on their uniforms, which we'll come to in a minute. But this logo, instantly, I'm not talking about sitting on it for a couple of days. I'm talking about I set eyes to it, and I haven't changed my opinion. This is immediately one of the best logos in sports.
I
And
wouldn't disagree. I will, yeah.
it's just so good. It is a boat anchor, but instead of the just the usual whatever
Loop
it
at
looks
the
like,
top.
the loop at the
Yeah.
top, it's the outline of the Space Needle
Hmm.
that's known to Seattle.
Mhm.
Just magnificent.
Yep.
Oh, and instantly I put that as a background on my phone.
So
Oh,
nice.
chef's freaking kiss. Mwah.
Yeah, they did a great job with that. And honestly, it probably does play better as a secondary logo.
Yeah.
Maybe you could pull off a jersey with that being the chest. As a third jersey, I think that would be it'd be interesting to see if they could pull that up. I think they can, but I still think it's very, very good as a secondary logo.
Mhm.
And I'm with you 100% on that. Just I really also enjoy that all of the Seattle teams have a nautical theme. Obviously with the Sonics out of town, but you've got the Mariners, the Seahawks, and now the Kraken. And having spent a lot of time in that town for work,
Good reason to love
water is all around you. And
Yep.
so it's very much a thing up there. And they're very, very seafaring people and very proud of the bodies of water that surround them, the Puget Sound and Lake Washington. So I really, really like what they did.
Yeah, you ever want to meet a city or region that's just proud of themselves to no end? Seattle. and I say proud of themselves in a good way. I don't say
Sure.
proud of themselves in a bad way. Like Minnesota,
California?
state of hockey. Full of themselves.
Well, that too. Yeah, that too.
But, yeah, very, very proud. So yeah, very, very cool. And then we did get the full uniform look, which I cannot believe they did this all at once. But I
Same.
thank them
Yes.
for doing this all at once. But we got to look at the jerseys, and again, chef's kiss. I'd have to say, if you're looking at it, the away jerseys probably if I had to pick one, probably my favorite. But I mean,
Sure.
the home jersey just fantastic too.
Mhm.
It's the home jersey is primarily the dark navy color, and then there's a couple tones of teal with a little red stripe in there. Then those two logos, of course. No extracurricular piping or stripes or anything. And then the road uniforms, just basically the inverse, just a base of white with the hints of dark navy blue and the teal and the red. So it just
Yep. Yeah, they did a very good job with these, keeping them simple. And I'm glad they went with navy blue. I worried for a while, and we had talked about this. Seattle is very much blue and green. Mariners are blue and green. Seahawks are blue and green. The Seattle Storm, I believe, are blue and green. The what are they called? The Sounders.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, they're blue and green. Yep. It's very much a thing in Seattle, and I was worried about it because obviously the Canucks are not very far away, and the Canucks are currently, unfortunately, using blue and green. So I was very happy that
colors to go back to.
Yeah, I have several times. And so, yeah, I'm very happy that Seattle found a way to work a blue and green-ish. I know these teal, these aqua colors are shades of blue primarily, but it's kind of a blue-green, kind of an aqua, kind of a teal. I like that they were able to get adjacent to blue and green for this team. Just to kind of keep that city theme intact. I really, really like that.
Right. They didn't go the green route, but they still stuck with the blue and the theme of Seattle. So again, just another high mark for being true to the city of Seattle. So somebody, clearly not us, was paid to think of all of this and did so. So somebody out there has my admiration, because there's a lot of other people who get paid to come up with jersey designs that we go, people got paid for that. What an
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think our jobs as jersey consultants for the NHL are very much in danger if this Seattle person gets out.
didn't you tweet that? I want to say you tweeted that.
No, I don't think
I
so.
thought you did.
No.
Maybe I did. I can't remember. That was so long ago. All right. I think we're out of time, so we can call it a show and then come back whenever. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But
eventually.
Yeah, good show. Thank you to everyone for listening and tuning in. Be sure to follow Ben and I on Twitter at Ben Remington, at Giles Farrell. Our podcast Twitter is at GATG Wild Podcast. Subscribe and download this show on iTunes, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you get your podcast downloads. Find us there. And if you do listen on iTunes, please leave us a rating. We appreciate you, those who have. Especially shout out to you, Matthew A.K., who left us a nice rating this past week. So thank you to everyone who has. And again, check out 10krinks.com for continuing coverage of the Wild, even though their season is now officially in the books. But we have a lot to get to with the offseason now and the draft upcoming, even though the playoffs are still going. So do give us a look, content daily. So, yeah, we will be back with you again this next week, and we'll chat with you later.
Later.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Gill and the Goaltender podcast.
That's not resiliency. You're making it sound like we're good. That's all. I'm done.